House of the Dragon returns for its second season in just 1 week. That means that the number one question sweeping the nation is going to be who are all of these blonde people and why are they all so angry at each other? It's this issue that I hope to solve today. I'm going to be going in depth on each of the characters from House of the Dragon, explaining who they are, what they want, how they're related to each other, and then to add a little bit of a deeper element to it, because I like to do that, I'm going to talk about what I think is their biggest change from their book selves and whether I think it's a good change or a bad change. There won't be any spoilers for House of the Dragon Season 2 in this video, but I will go into some elements of the book, though no elements that will be covered in Season 2 or beyond that. This video is entirely dedicated to my parents, as I realize that it might be easier to just make this video than field a million texts over the next 2 weeks, as I did just watch the finale of Season 1 with my dad, and there were a lot of concerns about who certain people were. So let's get into discussing who every House of the Dragon character is going into Season 2 and their biggest change from the books. We're going to start with one side of the war and then move to the other. We'll begin with the side known as the Blacks. They are given this title due to the color of Rhaenyra's dress at one point during the series. At that same point, Alicent's dress was green, and thus the factions were named the Blacks and the Greens. So we'll go through Rhaenyra's Blacks and then get into Alicent/Aegon's Greens. Rhaenyra Targaryen is the eldest child of Viserys the First Targaryen. Viserys was the previous monarch. He died in the previous season. I'm not going to recap him because he's dead. There's a cool statue of him in the throne room now, though. But that aside, he stated that Rhaenyra was to be his heir upon his death. However, once he did expire due to what looked like a number of diseases, he essentially had given Alicent this dying request, and it sounded like he was trying to name Aegon as his heir. She took it the wrong way, crowned Aegon. Otto conspired to crown Aegon for years, but regardless, Rhaenyra is out of a crown and trying to find allies and essentially bind her cause together and take the throne. Where we left her at the end of last season was she had just given birth to a stillborn child, and after that, at the very end of the season, she lost one of her other children, which we'll get into in a second. So, going into Season 2, Rhaenyra will likely be fueled by this very large sense of vengeance for what she's lost, for the throne that she was supposed to have, and for the children that were ripped from her by the Greens. I think the biggest change to Rhaenyra from the books is her overall nature and kind of relationship with this conflict. In the book, she's much more vengeful and rageful just from the jump, and I think she's much more nuanced in the show insofar as she is trying to take a balanced approach, at least through all of episode 10, navigating things without bloodshed and trying to find some solution that won't result in thousands and thousands of people burning to death. I think it's a good change. It makes her a more interesting character. Next up is Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince. He's Rhaenyra's uncle, Viserys' brother, Rhaenyra's husband, and father to a bunch of characters in the show. He was Viserys' heir at the very beginning of the series. However, due to a falling out after the death of Viserys' son, he is unnamed and goes on this rebellious streak throughout Westeros. He's one of Martin's favorite historical figures, and he's often described as someone of light and dark in equal parts. This really doesn't track all that much in the books, at least. He really just kind of does some bad things. But in the show, I think that Matt Smith does a good job of portraying kind of a nuance to Daemon. He's still a terrible person who does terrible things, but you can very much see the inner conflict within him. And despite the fact that he kills his wife with a rock, say, you can still sympathize for him when his brother passes on and similar things. I think it's a good change overall. I should also mention, Rhaenyra rides the dragon Syrax, and Daemon rides the dragon Caraxes. I should include those two. Getting now into the children of those two individuals, we have Rhaenyra's first three children, in order of birth, being Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey. Jacaerys, also called Jace, is the heir to the Iron Throne if Rhaenyra's claim is to be believed. At the end of the last season, he was sent off to the Eyrie and then to Winterfell. In the books, it's also White Harbor. And Luke, we saw, was sent off to Storm's End to entreat with the Baratheons, where he was subsequently killed by Aemond in a whoopsie. Joffrey is just a little kid. He hasn't served as an emissary yet, and his dragon Tyraxes isn't really big enough to ride. And overall, it seems the main difference with these characters is their parentage. While in the books, it's heavily implied that they're bastards, and many characters believe it, it's not so outright confirmed. It's not exactly clear because Rhaenys, their grandmother, supposedly from Laenor, their supposed father, does have black hair because she is descended from the Baratheons. So the fact that these three strong boys have black hair could be at least partially denied based on that fact. So it is a bit interesting to have that in the books. I'd say this is more of a negative change than we've seen so far, but overall, that's more of a change for Rhaenys than anything else. I should also mention Jace's dragon is Vermax, and Luke's dragon is Arax, or was Arax. Rip. Rhaenyra also has two more kids. These two with Daemon, they're blonde. We saw them briefly in episode, I think it was 8, and then we see them in a promo image for season 2. They are Aegon, who is the younger, or the older of those two. He's also called Aegon the Younger, which is why I just did that slip up. And there's also Viserys. I'm not going to say anything more about these two because I have to contain myself and not spoil things. But Aegon does have a dragon called Stormcloud, who we haven't seen yet. Daemon also has two children from a previous marriage. His marriage to Laena Velaryon yielded two daughters, Baela and Rhaena. One of them, Baela, is a dragon rider, riding the dragon Moondancer, who we see throughout several shots in the season 2 trailers. I think Moondancer was originally intended to be in the first season, but got cut due to time or CGI or something. Rhaena does not own a dragon, and she is kind of lesser in Daemon's eyes for it. You get the sense, as anytime we see him interact with his daughters, it is pretty much just with Baela, and Rhaena's kind of an afterthought. They really don't change much about these two from the books, at least so far, though if rumors are to be believed, there are some large changes coming for them in the second season, and we'll see exactly how those go. Those are the main things dominating my thoughts in terms of book changes for them, so I'm not going to get into it for the sake of not spoiling things. The strongest supporters of Rhaenyra's cause are her, I think, second cousin, Rhaenys. I believe the relationship is second cousin, if I'm correct, and her husband, Corlys Velaryon. Rhaenys is a dragon rider. She rides the dragon Meleys. We saw her burst out of King's Landing with it in the second to last episode of last season. And Corlys is known as the Sea Snake. He is a very famous sailor and has the best fleet in Westeros by a pretty sizable margin. These two factors combine to make them pretty important allies for Rhaenyra. In the books, her sigil is actually quartered with theirs because she was married to Laenor, and it does make sense just to kind of show the support of this house. I think the biggest change to these two is how much we get more in depth on their relationship. We get to see their struggles throughout season 1. It's kind of a tug back and forth between Corlys's hunger for glory and Rhaenys kind of, to quote her, putting the business behind her. Overall, their relationship was one of my favorite aspects of the first season. I think if I had to say a favorite character from the first season, it's probably Corlys, and I am pumped to see more of them in season 2. Before we finish with Rhaenyra's side, there are two additional characters who I want to mention who we haven't met yet, but who are going to be at least fairly important in this second season. They've been revealed in trailers and in promo images, so I don't feel bad saying their names or who they are, and they were also mentioned at the end of the first season. Those being Cregan Stark and Jane Arryn. The two of them are lords that Rhaenyra hopes to win to her cause, and given that they rule two entire regions of Westeros, their support would mean a lot. We see Jace and Cregan at the Wall in the season 2 trailer, so it seems like his voyage is definitely extended from the books, which will be interesting to see. And at the halfway point of the video, be sure to subscribe, like the video, all that typical YouTube stuff. It really helps me out, and I've got a lot more House of the Dragon stuff coming in the near future just for you specifically. You are why I'm making these videos. We now arrive at the Greens, led by their fearless leader, the king who bore the sword and crown of the conqueror, Aegon II Targaryen. All of the early reports from season 2 herald him as a standout performance, and I am pumped for that. I think Aegon II has the potential to be a super interesting character, and I'm really excited to see what they do with him, given certain books events that are going to transpire throughout the second season. He's very much portrayed as someone who really doesn't care about anything, someone who's just kind of mindlessly cruel and is just kind of doing whatever he wants because that's going to make him feel good. That is a little bit of a change from the books. At least in the books, his kind of cruelty and negative aspects aren't so directly shown to the reader. And you also get the sense that the book might be written with some sort of bias towards him in mind, given the influence that his mother's house, the Hightowers, have over the maesters in Old Town who record the histories. So it is interesting to see that change in this kind of objective take on the series, but I am very excited to see how the Green King does in season 2 of House of the Dragon. Helaena Targaryen is the second daughter of Alicent Hightower and Viserys Targaryen. The former of those we'll get to in a minute here. Helena's biggest change from the books is the fact that they made her a dragon dreamer. Throughout the first season, she has these recurring visions of the future, some of which we see come true as the season progresses, and I think that'll be super fascinating to see in season 2, especially as war goes on. If someone were to catch on to that, that could be a pretty massive advantage, or she could just kind of fly off the handle with any negative events that happen to her. It's also worth noting that she and Aegon have, I think, 2 children in show canon, those being Jaehaerys and Jaehaera, these two twins we see in episode, I think, 9 it is, or episode 8, maybe both of those. I believe it is both of those now that I'm checking my notes. It is both of those, and there is another child of hers that exists in the books and maybe exists in the show. I don't think exists in the show, whose name is Maelor. We'll see how that comes up in the future. Next up is the Daemon we have at home. I'm kidding. I love Aemond with all my heart. He's one of my favorite characters in the dance. He might be my favorite character in the dance. Actually, I think I like Daeron more, but we won't meet Daeron this season. Aemond is the younger brother of Aegon II Targaryen and rides the largest dragon in Westeros, that being Vhagar. Vhagar was around for Aegon's conquest and dwarfs any other dragon in her wake. This is a massive advantage to the Greens, as Vhagar is kind of a weapon like no other. The biggest change I'd say for Aemon from the books is the kind of event over Storm's End at the end of last season being a complete and total oopsie. In the books, he very much intended to kill Luke and Arrax, at least as far as we know, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Aemon reacts to that going forward into season 2 of House of the Dragon. If I had to guess how he's going to react, he's going to try to put a face on it. He's going to try to be this badass who still was in complete control and tried to kill his cousin because he wanted to. But I think behind that, there might be a layer of regret or self-doubt or something similar. And I'm really excited to see that. The performance, I hope, is going to be excellent. Also, I forgot to mention dragons for the last 2. Aegon rides Sunfire, who is said to be the most beautiful dragon who ever lived, who we see in some trailers. And Helena rides Dreamfire. Alicent Hightower is the mother of the 3 characters I just listed, and she is a very important figure in King's Landing. She was the second wife of the previous king, Viserys I, and because of her misunderstanding, this kind of plot to crown Aegon gets started, at least in the show. Though it did seem like some elements of the plot existed beforehand, with members of the Green Council scheming ahead of time. Alicent is in a very kind of conflicted position at the beginning of season 2. We see her in trailers seeming like kind of an advocate for middle ground and peace, at least compared to her sons. So it'll be interesting to see her navigate that, as she doesn't have any dragons, and given the fact that her sons are kings and have dragons, they really have a lot more power than she does, and she really can't do much. So it'll be interesting to see how she navigates that in this second season. I think she'll hopefully be an improved character from the book. The main change for her in the books is that she's younger and best friends with Rhaenyra. That does not happen at all in the books. They pretty much hate each other from the jump. And I think that them being simpatico at a young age is just awesome. I'm a huge fan of that change. We now arrive at some small council people for Aegon II, the Green Council. We have Otto Hightower, who is the king's grandfather. He looks pretty good for a grandfather, I must say, though Alicent was like 5 when she gave birth to Aegon. Otto is a schemer as always. He's a member of House Hightower, a second son, who stands nothing to inherit what he doesn't seize for himself, according to Daemon, though that also describes Daemon. Otto Hightower is someone who tried to advance Aegon to the throne, has now seemingly succeeded, and is now going to try to do anything to keep him on that throne. He's hand of the king, so he has a fair bit of power to do so, but it is worth noting that power rests on the king listening to him. Any interactions we've seen between Otto and Aegon before now have been Otto scolding Aegon for being drunk. We also have the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Criston Cole, who is just beloved by all. Great guy, everybody loves him. Obviously, the embittered ex-lover of Rhaenyra. A big change with him is that entire story, as it is all speculation in the books, whereas in the show we actually get to see their fling and then falling out play out in real time. And given the fact that he is now Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, he's in a position to do a lot of damage, because we saw in Season 1, this is a pretty volatile guy who will beat a guy to death for pretty much no reason. Kind of a Ralph Cifaretto type, honestly, in my eyes. Continuing across the council, we have Jasper Wilde, who we didn't see much of in Season 1, called the Iron Rod for a number of reasons, one being his justice, one being his, I think, 18 kids, Jesus Christ. He is the Master of Laws, succeeding Otto Hightower, Lionel Strong, Speaking of the Strongs, though, there's also Laris, who is the uncle of Rhaenyra's kids. He is the current Lord of Harrenhal, and he is the individual who's the Master of Whispers. Some have theorized that he might be a Green Seer. I think there's more evidence for him being a warg than a Green Seer, but we'll see if that develops any further in Season 2. Additionally, the last member of the Green Council worth discussing is one Tyland Lannister. Tyland is the twin brother of Jason. Twins run in the family for the Lannisters, and he is someone who is pretty important. He's just been appointed to Master of Coin to succeed the recently deceased, for some unknown reason, Lyman Beesbury. And his role is going to be pretty interesting in the upcoming season. I'd keep an eye on him. He gets important. There are also a number of interesting new characters who are going to be introduced in Season 2. I'm not going to say anything about them, except my favorite character is Hugh, and you'll all know why, because he's great, and you're all going to love him, and you better love him, because he's the best. He's going to be even better in the show, apparently. They released a bio for him, and they made some interesting and good changes, so I'm pumped for Hugh. Which character are you looking forward to seeing the most in House of the Dragon Season 2? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below. Of course, while you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It helps me grow the channel. It's free, and I'll have many more House of the Dragon videos coming out all throughout Season 2, as well as live streams, so stick around. Even in the off-season, I talk about the Song of Ice and Fire books a lot, so yeah, it's going to be a great time over on the Quinn the GM channel. Thank you all so much for watching again, and I hope you have a great rest of your week waiting for this first episode of House of the Dragon Season 2.